welcome to our meeting for the Racism Discrimination Task Force. Any amendments to the agenda? I don't see any hands, I don't believe. Stand across. Any disclosure of conflict of interest? I don't believe we have any. The minutes have been posted, but we'll give people a chance to review the minutes and we will adopt those at the next meeting. So we're thrilled today to have a delegation from Shrishma and Dabe, but who Shrishma is a legislative specialist for elections, policy, and project management office of the town clerk, and at the city of town or city of Whitby, I'm not sure which, but okay, big town, yes. So we got a delegation. So as a delegation, she's going to come here and present the journey building a staff-led diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. So Nadine had participated in a session with Shrishma before and suggested that we have her here today. So Shrishma, we're excited to see your presentation. The floor, the table, the screen, whatever is yours.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And thank you everyone for inviting me to be part of your meeting today. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. Good morning, and I hope you're all feeling well, you're all keeping healthy. The presentation I'm about to make to you today is similar to the one that I had made to the AMCTO Municipal Leaders Forum, which Nadine, of course, attended, and we had a few conversations about it afterwards. But I have provided some updates to that presentation because a lot has happened since April, and I wanted to just give you guys a fulsome overview of what we've accomplished so far. You know, I've said this before and I'll say it again, is that every single municipality's journey is different when it comes to the diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I hope that at the end of this presentation, you gain one or two valuable insights, which will help you which will help you on your own journey. So I'm just going to keep going, and I'm hoping that maybe we can save the questions till the end, just because I think that a lot of the things that you may have questions about would be addressed over the course of the presentation. So let me start off by introducing myself. My name is Shrishma Dabe, and I am a legislative specialist at the town of Whitby. I work in the clerk's office on municipal elections, policy, and corporate projects. I want to note that I'm not a diversity expert. I am just a person who works for an awesome organization, and I want to help make it better. I always say that I am a cog in the wheel that is diversity, equity, and inclusion. So today, I want to talk to you about the Whitby experience and our town's journey in making incremental strides to address diversity and inclusion within our workforce. My talk today will focus primarily on the staff-led grassroots movement through the establishment of the staff-led Diversity and Inclusion Task Force, and not so much the corporate work that Whitby has done, although I will touch on that as well. I again want to emphasize that this is a journey. It's not a destination. It takes incremental steps with a lot of stops, considerations, learnings, and redirects to get to the point where we can finally be happy with our progress. And then we continue moving forward because we want to continually improve. For us at the town of Whitby, and in general, I think that inclusion and belonging is the goal, but diversity is the outcome. So before I get started, and maybe to wake a couple of you up, I will say, I just want to ask a couple of questions for you guys. Now, you can either answer by writing in the chat box. If you want to unmute, you're absolutely welcome to do that as well. So the first question that I have for the folks on the call here today is, who here has heard of diversity, equity, and inclusion terms such as unconscious bias or allyship prior to 2020?
I have. I've actually walked the path for some time, and so I'm somewhat familiar as an active person trying to be an ally and supporter.
Excellent. And I see here that Raven has also heard of these terms. Have you heard of terms like white privilege or systematic racism? Yeah, a few of you look like you have heard of these kind of terms before. Excellent. So this is an engaged group. All right, here's my second question. Who here has had DE&I programming as well as staff resources available for diversity matters prior to 2020? So in terms of your municipality, have you had any DE&I programming prior to 2020?
No, but actually, Councillor McKenna and I have a session tomorrow.
Okay, great. So this is something that you started thinking about. So I'm going to skip over my next question, which was really more geared towards municipalities as a whole. And that was really how many of you are looking at creating DE&I programming? And I know that Smith Falls is looking into this, over the course of the next year or so. So before I get started, I think that it's really important for us to establish some context on our topic today, because DE&I is a very complex issue, and the way that it has unfolded in the public service realm is unique compared to other sectors. And I think it's very important for us as a municipality to be cognizant of that. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I think it's important for us to note that although discussions of anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism, and systematic barriers were occurring within the public service realm, these discussions were sporadic and not context-driven. On a municipal scale, definitely, this was not a topic that would be considered urgent or top of mind for many municipal leaders. Then, of course, the pandemic happened. Social inequalities within the healthcare system and the economic impact of the pandemic were at the forefront of this struggle. As Canadians were grappling with this reality, the murder of George Floyd invigorated a worldwide Black Lives Matter movement. There were days of protest over police brutality and racism across the United States, prompted by the police killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, as well as the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. In Toronto and in Canada, we had our own BLM protests centered around the deaths of Regis Korchinski-Paquette, as well as many others. Many of you may
also, may I include Mississippi Indigenous women who I work with and walk with for many, many years.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, that has been an ongoing discussion that's been going on in Canada. And many of you may actually remember this particular photograph of Prime Minister Trudeau kneeling in solidarity to the Black Lives Matter movement. You may also remember some of these pictures of other high-ranking police public officials kneeling in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. So in Canada, as we observed these events unfold in the United States, discussions of anti-Black racism were initially met with disbelief. This sort of stuff doesn't happen here. That's really what the mindset was. Doug Ford even initially said that there was no systematic racism in Ontario, before quickly backtracking on his words. There was increased pressure and urgency as public officials were criticized for the lack of moral leadership on this matter, and an increased scrutiny on systematic racism in the public service in particular. The provincial government has responded to this new reality by striking something called a new Equality of Opportunity Task Force, and they earmarked $1.5 million to help Black community groups. Headed by lawyer Jamil Javani, Premier Ford's advisor on community opportunities, this new anti-racism panel was designed to help young people overcome social and economic barriers and achieve success. In the municipal world, there were increased pressure on organizations to review their DE&I practices and ensure that they were current and meaningful. So how did that affect Whitby? DE&I was something that the town was committed to as part of the development of our core values. Over the last few years, our town's organizational effectiveness team has worked hard to build a corporate people strategy, which is linked to a strategic plan that has set deliberate and intentional behaviors in our core values training related to inclusion. We have also made changes to recruitment practices, created a flexible work policy. We've also struck a culture team that works with senior leadership to develop opportunities for inclusion. Out in the community, discussions on DE&I were happening through our citizen member diversity and inclusion advisory committee. So I guess this is similar to what you would be, a citizen member, Diversity and Inclusion Committee. We have one in Whitby as well. In fact, this committee was the one that initially approached the town and asked for employee and council member training on diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. In addition to this, there were also a lot of discussions happening at the senior leadership level about supporting diversity on advisory boards and committees and how that could happen. So as you can see, when these discussions were happening in 2020, a lot of discussion was also taking place within the town of Whitby. A lot of thought was going into this, a lot of planning was taking place. But the interesting thing about that was this was all primarily behind the scenes. Employees were not really privy to these discussions unless they were part of groups that were having them. And employees definitely didn't have opportunity for direct feedback and input. There was no real dialogue related to DE&I happening at an employee level. In all honesty, town staff was reeling from the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement. There was definitely a corporate recognition that these were heavy issues and they were affecting employees' mental health. So the recurring communication from the corporation was centered around that, employees' mental health and wellness. There was no significant communication on the staff level about Black Lives Matter, the murdered and missing Indigenous women inquiries, or any of those issues that were happening. And there was no discussion about what we as an organization were planning on doing to address the questions that had arisen out of that. Those discussions, even at a senior level, had largely stalled as the corporation dealt with the pandemic. So that, for me, and for some of my colleagues, was the turning point. I can honestly say, for personally speaking, I was extremely frustrated. I was horrified, disturbed with the images that were at the forefront of the Black Lives Matter movement. And I wanted to know what we as an organization were going to do about it. I have to say personally, this was a huge struggle for me. I am a visible minority. I identify with the BIPOC community. I'm a first generation immigrant. I came to this country when I was a teenager. I'm not Black, but the issues and challenges raised by the BLM movement really resonated with me. I wanted to know how I could help and how we as an organization could do something to address these issues. I knew I was not the only employee within the town of Whitby that felt that way. So I spoke with someone who had similar questions. And together we went to our head of organizational effectiveness to get some answers. We didn't know what we were expecting, to be very honest with you, but we just knew that we had to ask the question. The response we received, in all honesty, was not very heartening. Our head of organizational effectiveness explained to us everything that I just told you about all the discussions that were taking place and all the plans to implement DE&I programming. But she mentioned that competing priorities and budgetary constraints made it difficult for her to move forward with a corporate DE&I plan. Her feedback was not unreasonable, and we understood the challenges her department was facing. At that point, we knew that we needed to create a space within the organization to have safe discussions about DE&I issues and create awareness and education opportunities for staff. So, as employees, we suggested the striking of a staff-led task force on diversity and inclusion. I would be one of the co-chairs, along with Kevin Naraway, who is our Manager of Legislative Services and Deputy Clerk. To be honest, we weren't sure if senior leadership would go for such a task force. There was already DE&I programming in the works. Perhaps they didn't want to devote the time and resources to another task force, especially when resources were already stretched due to the pandemic. To our delight, the head of OE supported the task force. So we put out a call for volunteers to the entire organization in August 2020. To be honest, I wasn't sure what we were expecting. With the pandemic, the interactions with our coworkers had become very limited. Some of the water cooler discussions that you would normally have around social issues were simply not happening. our co-chair, the co-chair of the task force, and I, we just didn't know if people wanted to participate in a task force or if there would even be an appetite within our organization for any awareness or education campaign related to D&I. I'm not sure how the task force, I'm not sure how the makeup is of your employees in Smith Falls, but within the town of Whitby, it's primarily homogenous. And so we weren't entirely sure if there was going to be any sort of interest in having any discussions about DE&I. To our absolute delight and surprise, the response and support we received from the organization was overwhelming. We had over 20 people from all over the corporation volunteer to sit on the task force. These were true champions of change, and they were passionate about creating a DE&I space within the town. Our inaugural meeting was in September 2020, and from there, we started to form a plan and a way forward. I think it's really important to note here that we didn't really give a lot of thought on what we were going to do once we actually did come together. We were more motivated by the cause than we were by an actual terms of reference. We didn't actually have any sort of roadmap, and we were also not diversity expert. We just wanted to create a safe space and slowly build trust within the task force for sharing ideas and projects. One very positive thing, though, is that a few members of the task force were already involved in other corporate, internal, and external DE&I initiatives, and their knowledge and experience fed into the work that the task force wanted to do. Our initial meetings, in many ways, were sharing circles. We talked about our own experiences with racism or prejudice. We talked about our families and struggles they had faced as new immigrants or as racialized students. We talked about LGBTQ issues and the challenges that people with invisible disabilities face. We also talked about white privilege and allyship and unconscious bias. Our discussions were raw, and they were open, and they were at many times extremely difficult. But as we shared our stories, we started to brainstorm ideas and come up with concrete projects that we could work on to elevate the task force and provide value to other employees. One of the most amazing things that happened when we struck this task force was that it was really the push that the corporation needed to kickstart its own corporate DE&I programming mandate. We received overwhelming support from the senior leadership team and even had 2 members of the leadership team join the task force. Some members of our leadership team joke that the establishment of this task force was the kick in the butt that they needed in order to start focusing on DE&I issues and give them the importance that they deserve. Discussions around DE&I that had stalled since the onset of the pandemic, they started up again. There was clearly a desire from employees to do this programming. There was grassroots support from the task force, and there was a corporate plan which had been shelved, but it was in place for DE&I programming. So it was time to strike while the iron was hot. So as I outlined before, as the task force was being formed, other cogs in the wheel were in motion. DE&I was already entrenched in the town's people strategy, the corporate strategic plan, and the core values of collaboration, accountability, respect, and engagement, or CARE. As a task force, we didn't actually want to create another strategy on DE&I because it was already something that the corporation had articulated in several other overarching documents. Our goal was to ensure that we were pursuing actionable items, metrics, education that would realize the success against the objectives that were already established in those existing strategies. As a task force, we wanted to serve our coworkers, but we also wanted to ensure that the work that we did was aligned and integrated with the external DE&I advisory committee, the region of Durham, and the town's corporate plans. It was a tall order, but we pursued it with a lot of enthusiasm. Some members of our task force initiated discussions with the organizational effectiveness team at the town, which reinvigorated the development of the DE&I training plan. This plan would provide foundational education on DE&I issues, such as unconscious bias, anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism, systematic racism, etc. These members of the task force were critical in providing feedback and building a training plan that would be meaningful to all staff. At the same time, other members of the task force, in conjunction with other corporate departments, were working on finalizing an RFP to complete a current state study that would look at workforce and advisory committee demographics and determine baseline metrics on DE&I. The study would also complete a qualitative analysis about employee and customer experience to feed into a fulsome inclusivity report. You can't move forward if you don't know where you are, and getting these metrics would be critical to the DE&I work that the town was trying to do. I'm happy to actually say that this is something that has been ongoing for the last 2 months. We hired a consultant out of Windsor, and they have initiated something called the IDEA project. So that's Inclusivity, Diversity, Equity, and Anti-Racism project within the town of Whitby. We are doing several surveys, focus groups, etc., in order to build an inclusivity report, which reports on metrics related to diversity and inclusion within the town as a corporation, but also in how we supply customer service, inclusive customer service to different stakeholders. Another thing that we did, that the town did rather, was that the Office of the Clerk also started reviewing recruitment practices for town boards and advisory committees to see how they could encourage diverse candidates to apply. This includes reviewing the application form to gather key demographic data, reviewing best practices from other municipalities, especially the City of Toronto, which is a leader in this field, and also completing a current state demographic scan of existing advisory board and committee members, and looking for training opportunities. The Fire and Emergency Services Department is also currently reviewing their hiring practices and developing actionable strategies to encourage diverse populations to consider a career in fire services. Our fire chief is a very important ally in this because this is something he feels very strongly about and has been a champion in this matter. So that is to say, our little task force, which has really started as a safe space for employees to come together and talk about their experiences, became a catalyst for a much broader corporate programming. We started in September 2020, and we have already achieved much more than we thought possible. The discussions around DE&I issues, which were primarily behind the scenes, are now happening openly. We ask questions, we discuss programming, and we engage with each other respectfully and openly. This is not something that is behind closed doors, just limited to senior leadership and is crisis management. No, it's a real dialogue. It was bigger than something we could have ever imagined. But at the same time, for task force members, it was very important that we remain true to our goal. It is very important to all of the members of our task force that we are not performative. As the corporation started moving forward with its own DE&I agenda based on the corporate strategic plan, we wanted to ensure that we were not engulfed by its mandate. We felt responsible in ensuring that we furthered the goals of DE&I at the town as a corporation. But at the same time, we wanted to provide a critique to ensure that it was serving the best interests of all employees. This had to be real change, not a flash in the sky. We also had our own ideas about how we could advance discussions about diversity within the town. It was important that DE&I was led by staff rather than dictated by the corporation in order to ensure buy-in and lasting impact. One of the things we wanted to pursue was the establishment of something called ERGs, or Employee Resource Groups. We also wanted to develop a speaker series on important DE&I issues and figure out a way to educate staff on different religious and cultural celebrations. We want to develop an allyship program within the town and create safe spaces and sharing circles to discuss difficult issues. As you can see, we have set the bar very high. There's a lot of work to do, but we're ready for it. As I said at the start of this presentation, Inclusion and belonging is the goal, and diversity is the outcome. We are a long way from the outcome, but we're taking the right steps to get there. In the 9 months that the task force has been operational, we have already accomplished several things. This includes a presentation to and an endorsement by the senior leadership team of the employee resource groups. For the time being, we're going to start 2, the LGBTQ ERG and the Women of Whitby ERG. As these grow and as people become more comfortable with training and ERG processes, we will likely start more ERGs. The corporation has also endorsed the beginning of an allyship program, which we are hoping to start later in this year. We're looking at the resources we're going to need and how we're going to, how we're going to make that happen within the town. There's a lot of interest about starting training on what allyship means and how people can be effective allies. So that's something we definitely want to pursue. We've already had confirmation of a speaker series plan for 2021, and we're currently developing a plan for 2022. We recently, actually, just yesterday, had a fantastic speaker come in from Trent University, and she spoke to us about Indigenous history in Canada and what that means for Canadians, and how does Indigenous space, what is Indigenous space really is what she talked about. It was fantastic. We had another speaker come in and talk about unconscious bias. And, we're having another speaker come in to talk about the history of residential schools and how we as Canadians can be advocates for Indigenous issues. The feedback we've received from our speaker series from staff has been extremely positive. And I look forward to hearing perspectives from diverse individuals as we move along. Next year, we're planning a speaker series on LGBTQ issues, and we're looking to bring a speaker in to perhaps speak about the South Asian and the Asian experience in Canada. So that would be something I think would be very valuable as well. We've also created a staff video on diversity that has launched the corporate D&I training program. So that's the other thing that the corporation has done, but that we've supported is this large-scale corporate training program on DE&I, just to build the foundations of all employees on what that means for them and key issues within the DE&I sphere that are relevant and that they should be aware of. In addition to this, several members of the task force sit on various corporate committees. So they're able to bring a DE&I lens to the work that the corporation is doing on several fronts. This includes the culture team, the corporate sustainability plan, customer service strategy, and the continuous improvement committee. Our task force will continue to evolve as the organization grows. We started organically as like-minded people who had a desire for change. We will continue to provide a safe space for dialogue on DE&I so that we can build trust and a community of practice within the organization. We want to build a culture of inclusion and belonging, because that is something that cannot be enshrined within a training plan or a strategy. It has to be built through interactions, and it has to be owned by every member of the staff. We will also continue to hold ourselves accountable and hold the organization accountable and learn and grow with respect to this very important and very multifaceted subject. I'm not entirely sure how we're going to get to our goal, but I do know that we have the right people in place to succeed. And really, that is what is the most important thing. So I've talked a lot and I've probably given you a lot of information in the last 30 minutes. Some of these things you may relate to, some of them may seem completely alien to you. So I want to leave you with some takeaways and some lessons that we learned as we go through this journey. Ask the difficult questions. Ask them of yourself. Ask them of your peers and of your organization. Don't be afraid of hurting feelings or sentiments. This is a difficult subject and it requires difficult conversations. As long as you're respectful, you will be fine. Allow yourself the grace to question your own behavior, but don't be ashamed of it. learn from your mistakes, and be willing to open yourself up to new ideas. One of the main questions I kept asking myself when I started my own journey was, well, how can I help? How can I be an ally? What can I do today to make things better? Start there. If you find champions of DE&I within your organization, recruit them. Give them the space, the resources, and most importantly, the time they need to succeed. Allow them to encourage others to follow them on this DE&I journey. Support them. In relation to that point, I also think that it's important to note that the organization as a body can only do so much. There is an onus on employees to empower themselves and start the dialogue for the kind of change they want to see in an organization. There's a saying, decisions are made by those who show up. If you show up, if you have respectful dialogue, and you engage the right people, you'll be surprised at how open people are, especially about something like this. But it has to be a two-way street. It can't be top down. I believe this is what worked for us. Corporately, senior leadership was interested in implementing DE&I. So when the ask came from employees through the task force, they were open and they were ready to engage. This may not be completely relevant to you, but if you are considering as a municipality to develop some sort of a corporate strategy, you have to ensure that DE&I is part of that corporately adopted strategy. It can't be completely employee driven. There has to be an executive sponsor at the leadership table, but there also needs to be autonomy for action items. DE&I must be enshrined within your corporate documents for it to be accepted, for it to have linkages to the business plan, for it to have funding, because that's what's the most important thing as well. You can't do these things in a vacuum. Finally, remember, discussions around DE&I are not easy. They need to be handled with a lot of empathy and with a lot of thoughtfulness. So if anything, please be patient and kind to one another. Remember, every municipality is different and every context is different. Your journey will take you on your own path, but as long as you are clear on your core values as an organization, you'll be headed in the right direction. The pandemic has shown us how important human connection is, how much we as a people crave the company of one another, how it is essential to our mental and physical well-being. A big part of the push for a more inclusive culture is to understand the vast array of experiences that people are bringing to our organization. It helps us grow closer together at a time when we are far apart. So I now have a video that I would like to show you that we created to launch our DE&I program. And after that, if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. I don't know, Nadine, if I'll be able to show this video, so I'm going to try.
Okay.
Just give me one moment, please, and bear with me. I'm going to do my best to start this video. Thank you very much.
Panko, your microphone's off there.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure, but that's the end of our presentation. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
My apologies. My Wi-Fi had failed there briefly, but I'm back on. Trishma, thank you very much. And you mentioned at the start of your presentation, this is a journey for you and your team and your municipality. And we regard this exactly the same way. And it's great for us to be able to sort of follow in your footsteps. And the challenges in reinventing the wheel are, I guess, really reduced when we've got those like yourself who've walked before us. So I'll turn to the task force members for questions. Please, if you can, raise your hand either through the icons or simply raise your hand and let me know if you have any questions, please. Michelle.
Hi, thank you so much. That was terrific, and the amount of work that you've managed to do in a short time, a pandemic, is amazing. I think, and perhaps you could expand. It sounds like your success was creating your task force from within and starting really at the grassroots, and then having the engagement and the support of the senior leadership team. And then your work sort of rolled. And I love the fact that you talked about it being a journey. As we know, it's a journey of just doing better. So was that really one of the key pieces of success, do you feel, was starting from within and then building?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no silver bullet, and it's really hard to say that this is the way to do things in order to achieve success, right? Because everybody's context is so completely different. And for us, what happened is that there was a desire with the senior leadership team to do something. And then, of course, there was a desire within employees. Now, if the situation had been reversed where, the desire was there for employees and there was no desire from the senior leadership team, obviously my message here, I probably wouldn't be here today, to be very honest with you, because I wouldn't be able to get very far. Maybe I would be, if lucky, I would be able to maybe do a bit of training, maybe some education pieces, maybe put up some banners. And that would be the extent. And to be very honest with you, Michelle, when I first started this, that was what my expectation was. I thought to myself, if I can maybe get some education around D&I issues within the corporation, for me, that would be a success. I never really imagined for it to steamroll, or, well, maybe not steamroll, but like for it to just expand the way that it did. And that was what, for me, was so phenomenal, is the fact that when I thought I was the only one who felt this way, there were so many people within the organization that felt this way. And what's really great about it is that ever since we've started our education series within the organization, I've had a multitude of people come to me and say, I attended that training on Black History Month and the history of Black people in Canada, and I never knew that they did that. And that's so interesting. And I'm going to go and I'm going to read something about it, or I'm going to talk to my kids about it or something. And it's just, that renewed engagement that people had with one another, just learning about this, I think really helped. And one thing I will say, Michelle, and I will say to you is that it's really important when you're starting any sort of strategy to come from a place of empathy. You cannot just, this is a very emotionally charged topic, and it's very easy to say, you know, look at all these injustices that have happened. Of course, they're horrible. But if that's where you start, it's hard to then have meaningful discussion about it. It's much easier. I would say your journey will be a lot easier if you really start from a place of asking questions, a place where you say, you know, I don't know everything. I want to learn more. And so that is really what I suggest to other municipalities who ask me the same questions that you did.
Thank you so much. I think that that's really great advice, actually, for any new program that people are trying to initiate or expand on. And again, thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Additional questions? I'm just trying to scan through here. If you see anybody I don't, let me know.
I see many great comments there from everyone. I hope you can see them, Shrishma, in the chat. They're very grateful for your presentation.
Shrishma, I have a couple of questions myself, so and maybe others may rise here. How will you measure success?
So that's a great question, Your Worship. And what I would say is that for us, there's a couple of things that we're looking for as a task force. Now, we don't see ourselves as serving as like a, how do I put this? Like we don't have a terms of reference. We don't really have any sort of responsibilities. We're a loose group of individuals within this organization, and what we're doing is critiquing and looking at what the organization is doing to advance DE&I work. So our goal really is to look at our corporate strategic plans that have been established that look at DE&I and that incorporate DE&I, and to judge whether the work that we're doing as a corporation is aligning with the goals that we have said that we're going to do. And also, one of the things that we've been able to convince council and senior leadership and to do is to add DE&I as a major factor in our business plan. And so we're looking at trying to get some metrics around diversity and inclusion within the organization. So as I said, we've been able to hire, well, not us, but we worked with the corporation to help hire somebody, a consultant, to do metrics around diversity and inclusion within the town as a corporation, but also around how and whether we are whether we're delivering inclusive customer service to our residents and how we can improve on that. So the goal is that once we have this inclusivity report from the consultant, that'll give us a bit of a roadmap on what we can do as an organization. So at this point, as a task force, as I said, we really came together and we didn't really know what we were doing. And we were just trying to do something with respect to DE&I. But we're hoping once this inclusivity report comes and it gives us some figures and some metrics around what diversity and inclusion, the situation within our particular town, that'll give us a way forward as well.
And you see a finite term for the task force, or do you see this maybe becoming potentially a standing committee of council?
So that's a really great question. And we've been talking quite a bit about that as well, because as I said, we don't have a terms of reference. We don't have any sort of endorsement from council, or we're just a group of people that came together within the organization. And so I think that we have had some discussions about potentially disbanding once we feel that the corporation is on a very solid journey for incorporating DE&I within all of its corporate policies. So we are looking at that. Likely what will happen is that we will continue to move forward and at least with establishing a ongoing training and education plan, speaker series, things like that. But we may merge eventually into the town's culture team and just become a subsidiary of the culture team. And then eventually that will be the one that really pushes broader social and diversity and inclusion issues within the organization.
Thank you. Chris, you have your hand up.
Yes, I wanted to start off by thanking you so much. And what I'm really very moved by the inclusion and the fact that you have used things like sharing circles, which are Indigenous concepts, as well as other concepts from other representatives within your community. I myself am an ally and a settler. However, the one wonderful gift that I love in what I'm hearing you talk about is that you're actually willing to include representatives from as many communities again as possible, whether they work within the town or possibly even grassroots. And that's something that I really think for our community could be a very important thing to continue forward with. And I think that sort of even governance is a really crucial way of moving forward when we talk about diversity and inclusion and creating safe spaces. Because really, if we're not listening to everyone equally, are we able to truly represent what our end goal would be? And that would mean that diversity, that respect of all culture, and that coming together, especially in the film clip that you showed at the end, where you really spoke about the fact that I may be a settler, but I may be a mom. And then someone else might be a mom as well, who's Indigenous or a person of color, or whichever cultural background one would come from. And I think that those show the crucial understanding of how we also can find a common ground. But I also think that what you spoke to about truth telling is incredibly important. And the fact that as long as it's done respectfully, as difficult as it may be at times, that's really key to creating as much diversity for as many people and as many cultural experiences within our communities as possible. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris.
Kaz?
Morning, Shrishma. I just actually have a very, well, it's probably a very elaborate question, but I'm going to try and simplify it. We're about to break out into some we're about to go into breakout groups. And thinking ahead towards that, I'm wondering, DE&I is such a huge or vast topic. Wondering if you can give the group some tips or tricks on how to go about starting off into this without necessarily, ending up boiling the ocean, so to speak, taking on everything all at once and pulling yourself or stretching yourself so thin that we're not overly effective with this. I'm all about efficiencies and any tips or tricks you can offer, I think would be greatly appreciated.
No, that's a really great question. And I will say this: I'm not a trained facilitator, and I'm not a diversity expert. So what I'm telling you now is really based on my own experiences within the town of Whitby and what we've done. So I just
that would be fantastic. Experience is better than anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, fair enough, Kaz. When we started this, we were at a very similar point that you are at, where we just came together. We knew we wanted to do something. We weren't sure where to start. So in all honesty, what we did in the beginning is we just talked about our experiences. We talked about what brought us to the table. Why were we there? What did we want to accomplish? We talked about those things. And it's like what Chris was saying, sharing circles, talking about difficult experiences, talking about what we wanted to do. And when you start doing that, when you start putting some of that stuff down, what we noticed as a team was that certain themes started coming out as to how we could move forward. So for example, for us, some of us were talking about the fact that, as visible minorities, we were not really seeing our own cultural celebrations or our culture represented within the corporation. Or we talked about the fact that as working mothers, we didn't really have a lot of the supports perhaps that we needed to do our jobs well, but also to give enough time to our families at home. And so when we started talking about these things, we found all these commonalities and all these themes. And then based on that discussion, we started thinking, okay, well, what can we do with that? And so that's when we looked at, we looked at, like, maybe putting some plans into action. So, like, for example, for us, we thought, okay, we have a lot of people on this team that are white, for lack of a better word, but but they want to be allies. So how can we help them be allies? Or we talked about the fact that there's all these people that are in this organization, and they come from all these different religious backgrounds and cultural backgrounds. What can we do to maybe educate the organization on these cultural backgrounds and on these cultural celebrations? So we came up with a plan for doing that. And then we thought, okay, well, there's some training that we can do, maybe some speakers that can come, that can talk about specific experiences as opposed to more foundational training. The corporation was already doing the foundational training on unconscious bias and all of that stuff. But these were speakers who can talk about things like Black history, about Indigenous history, talk about, like some of the other topics that we have coming forward over the course of the next little while. So it's really, like, for us, it was a very organic process. I would urge you to give that the respect that it and the time that it deserves, because you'll be surprised by giving yourself the time to share and giving your partners the time to share. You will find that you will get a lot of that information and that way forward.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. No, that's good. That's great. Thank you.
Janelle, did you have your hand up? I know you've got another commitment shortly.
I didn't, but that was so wonderful and exciting, and it's inspiring. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Janelle. Any other questions? I don't see any hands up. Shrishma, the other thing I would ask, I guess, is if you would, I guess, continue to share, I guess, your journey that enable us to put some structure around our journey itself. We appreciate that. And the other question I wanted to ask simply is allyship. And Kaz mentioned we'll be going into breakout group shortly, and one area. One group will be discussing sort of a community ambassador program, which I assume would be very similar to an allyship. Can you talk a little bit more about what your plans are for that, and maybe some of the how behind that?
Absolutely, and I will say this is that we've spoken here today. We've talked about a lot of issues. And my presentation, I know, was quite detailed, so it's a lot of information to take in. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. I don't want you to feel like there's so much to do and I have to do it today, because it is a journey. And the fact that you're here and that you're starting it is fantastic. I will do my best to help you over the course of this journey. I've been in touch with Nadine. Nadine, I can always forward you resources that I have, or connections with other much more intelligent people than myself who are leaders in this field, and I'm happy to provide that information to you. We, at the town of Whitby, have a diversity and inclusion advisory committee, which is an advisory committee of council. They are a community-based committee. So they have been doing some work within the community on some of these issues. To be very honest with you, that committee has also been reeling with some of the events of the last year. And so they have been looking inward quite a bit to see what they can do to address some of the systematic racism issues. So I'm happy to connect you with them as well. In terms of the allyship program, that is something that we're still working out. There is training that is available that we could take. And so some of our task force members are looking at establishing a core team that will perhaps complete the training and then can help train the rest of the organization on what it means to be an ally. And then we're going to maybe even, like, one of the things that we've been talking about is maybe sounds very simple, but having like some sort of a decals or something for employees to post on their near their workstations to say that they are an ally, and then if there's any difficult discussions that need to happen, that they would be the ones that you would come to. Because a lot of times what a lot of times happens is that people make ignorant comments, and it's hard when you're at the receiving end of that to actually be able to respond, or to be able to have a mechanism in place to address some of those comments. And so having this sort of program, building some sort of a relationship within employees on how they can address some of these comments is what we're trying to do. But Your Worship, I don't have a complete answer for you, but what I can do is as I said, I'll keep in touch with Nadine. We're planning on rolling something out by the end of the year. So at that point, I'm happy to share some of those resources and then help you in your journey as well.
Great, thank you. As we journey forward and together in many ways.
Yeah.
So in closing, I mean, I love the comment, inclusion and belonging is a goal, and diversity is the outcome. And I think we certainly share the same objective. So Shrishma, I don't think there's any more questions. We all appreciate very much your time today, your wisdom, your experience. And we look forward to, I guess, following your journey from a distance and in many ways sharing that journey with you.
Good luck. And as I said, always here to help. And I wish you all the best.
Great. Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
Okay, moving ahead. I think we're all set now for our breakout groups. So everyone received the email from Nadine indicating which breakout group you were in. And so Dave, I believe, or Brianne will be sending us into our breakout groups now. And once we all get in, we will start. We'll try and do that for about 45 minutes, and then we'll reconvene as a larger group just before we wrap up, if that's possible. Okay, hang in there.
Sorry, Mayor Panko. You and I have discussed it's a bit tricky with Zoom, so we're going to actually have to adjourn, and then everyone will go into the breakout groups.
Okay.
No, I can put you into them. Like I set them up.
Yeah, we just, because of transparency for the public, we have to adjourn the meeting just so it's, and then everybody can go into their group.
Okay.
Unfortunately, that's just
okay. Thanks, Nadine. So we will have to adjourn.
Do I have to do anything? Do I have to do anything, Nadine?
No, you can just stay on and
Just stay on. Don't touch anything. All right.
Yeah, procedurally, we'll adjourn the meeting. And then everybody will go into their groups. And then Mayor Panko, you and I had spoke about the next meeting possibly being July 21st. Maybe we can press that.
So before we adjourn, July 21st, I hope that works for everyone's schedules. And if you feel today that you want to have a additional meeting with your breakout group between now and then reach out to Nadine and we can facilitate a Zoom to enable that to happen anytime in the next month. Okay, so right now I'll seek a motion for adjournment, and then we will, everybody hang in there, will be placed into your breakout group. So need a motion, I need a hand raised from somebody. Needing to see a motion for
Ravens, moved by Raven, I believe.
Moved by Raven, seconded by, just need a hand. Peter, all in favor? Thank you. We are adjourned. Hang in there for your break.